Okay, I think Shashi, you just started the recording, but yeah, moving forward, right? What is the next step? It is setting up the compliance team, right? What kind of skills required, right? And is it the supplier communication is sourcing guys, or is it you need people for validation of the document who understand compliance, right? Maybe if you are dealing with a lot of full material disclosure or material substance level data, somebody from a chemistry background may help, right? People from environmental studies, metallurgy, even environmental science, and then even electronics, if you deal with a lot of electronic parts, or the mechanical, if you deal with mechanical items. These are all the people you can hire for data validation. The thing is, they should understand the regulation, at least at high level, right? And then I always recommend to have a quality check team, right? I mean, sometimes the supplier wordings in documentations are tricky, not clear. You at some point you should have random quality check before, because you want to set up a golden compliance database, right? So if you want to create that, you need to make sure that whatever is going inside that database is validated and accurate, right? So yeah, so that is about setting up the team and kind of skill sets you require. Always anticipate, at least even in the best of the best projects, we see tail end 4-5% of the suppliers not responding or not having the data, not providing the data, right? Or generally it can go up to 10% of the supplier parts, right? Where you have no response, or supplier is incognito, you are not able to establish connections, right? So and some of those parts are maybe important for your business, so you should have budgets allocated for testing. Anticipate some of your parts may get into the lab and determine compliance to reach that 100% of compliance at a bill of material level. So you need to test, budget for testing. And once you do all that and you have all the information to determine compliance at your product level, next important thing is the output, right? Why are you doing all these things? You want to determine compliance status at your product level, or sometimes company level, if, for conflict minerals and sub regulations, right? So either you have to report it to your customers, right? Or you need to report to regulatory bodies for like skip and other things, or you may want to determine whether there is a label you need to place on the product, right? Like for Proposition 65. So understanding the reporting and requirement and labeling and doing that as one step in your entire process is very important, right? And finally, everybody will, the eighth step, everybody will talk about this, right? I mean, this is not one-time activity. Regulation list, restricted substance list keeps growing. And you need to make sure that you are refreshing your documentations at regular intervals to stay compliant or understand whether you are compliant. And you need to be listening to the regulatory updates. Being upbeat about this is very important, to know the changes when they happen and take actions accordingly, right? So that you are early to plan and execute the project. So managing ongoing compliance is a very important aspects of building this program, right? So this is how you need to set up and understand, and you could go through these steps to set up a solid compliance program for your company. Shashi, you're in mute again, I assume.
Right. I'm sorry about that. Now that you told us about like how to set up a compliance program, we would want to know, like, the importance of data coverage. Can you please take us through that?
Yeah, right. So why are we, that is the most important part here, right? I mean, having testing is expensive, as most of you might have realized. right? And sometimes it's regulation specific testing. Complete material disclosure becomes more complicated as and how your parts becomes complicated. It is gets more expensive to test and identify compliance, right? So for high data coverage, there are three things, two important things. One is data management team, considering this as a process, right? The when do you send the emails to your suppliers, right? I mean, when do you follow up with them? What should be the message of that email? What are the skills you should have in your team, right? Maybe a communication guys to source the data, right, through emails and through phone calls, who can actively uh, engage the suppliers. And you need a compliance analyst or material analyst to understand that the declarations are valid, right? Or and then you want to have guys who are generating reports. I mean, it can be your compliance analyst team as well, and then responding to your customer request or completing your uh, obligation to do the submission, right? So a solid data management team, it cannot be half a support system from quality procurement. Some buyers are helping you out, somebody in the supply chain is doing the data collection, and we are just responsible to manage the data. That kind of an approach definitely won't work, or it takes forever for you to solidify your compliance program. This has to be either your own resources or a third party outsourced team to help you set up this data once, and then manage it, right, at a cost effective way, right? To have the data coverage, collaboration between internal teams becomes very important, right? Example, supply chain engineering, you guys getting involved in the new product introduction phase and understanding whether engineers are using compliance product. If not, suggesting, collaborating with component engineering team to suggest if see if there are a form fit functional compliant alternate part, right? Getting involved in that engineering change order management, communicating with the supply chain team, right? Figuring out the company's contacts inside that company, right? Trying to penetrate, getting the phone numbers of the right people inside that company too, or taking help from them to penetrate and get an answer from that suppliers, because buyers may be placing a lot of orders through them and may have an active relationship, right? So collaborations between teams is very crucial. And along with that, I want to touch on few best practices you can do to get do good data coverage, which includes right contact, right? A lot of time I see that emails are going to a sales contact inside a company, or a supplier procurement team, so on and so forth, right? I mean, you need to be talking to the right compliance guys inside that company, make sure that they understand what you are asking and responsible for it, and maintaining and building that supplier compliance contact database is very important. Timely follow up, right? Don't send one email today and then after 2-3 weeks you suddenly remember that you haven't got the data. So then following up, have that sequence well defined and establish a process for timely follow up with suppliers. Generally it takes 2 to 3 4 requests sometimes to get the complete data from some of these suppliers. And your company will have a lot of custom items, custom ordered items, custom PCB boards, custom mechanical intrusion parts and tools and things like that, right? So for a lot of these, you need to, if you have product part categories or commodity types, those kind of information in your ERP or PLM system, it's better to include that or have use that data to understand high risk items and prioritize and separate the custom items to see if any of this data, I mean material information, substance information is defined by our company, right? As a, if I am manufacturing, right? Then these material information maybe would be there in your drawings, right? Engineering drawings through material standards, or they would have defined those materials. If it is a chemical item, utilize safety data sheets to get the material substance information. So Identifying custom parts item and taking action accordingly it will definitely help you. Not looking at it like all other off the shelf and other parts. Generally, they are a little bit difficult to and get stuck during the last phase of the project. So take care of it. And then the marking out of scope items, right? Some of these larger Fortune 100 companies we work with comes with a lot of legacy parts, right? A lot of legacy items, and a lot of it is not used in today's world, or it is used in a product which is supplied to few old customers only, right? But otherwise, it's off the shelf. Understanding and for example, some of these parts like labels or packaging may be out of scope for some regulations like ROHS. Maybe based on the commodity type or the part type, you may be able to mark them out of scope, inactive, right? There will be a lot of stuffs in your bill of material, firmware items, services items, right? Marking them out of scope will reduce your volume of work and will be able to give you a correct gauge of what you need to achieve. I already spoke about taking help from component engineering teams to track the life cycle. A lot of components may be obsolete. If you know that upfront, if you have those information, will help you to track that effectively. And yes, wherever possible, I mean, sometimes for resistor capacitor kind of a product, you may get form fit functional alternate from the same suppliers, right? There might be compliant alternate. So checking with your suppliers to see if there is any compliant alternate when something is not compliant is also a good practice to increase the data coverage and determine compliance at your product level, right? So these are some of the things we could do, Shashi, to really make sure that we are going all out in getting the data from suppliers wherever it is available.
Perfect, right? Like now, you did speak about timely follow-up, and that actually follows up with supplier engagement, right? Now, our next slide talks about maximizing supplier engagement. Could you please tell us how can we take it forward without any hurdles?
Yeah, right. So suppliers are a key stakeholder. I think a lot of companies, what I have observed is ignore their suppliers. They are focused on data, right? But your focus or the program should be focused at suppliers, right? Building that long-term relationship with your supplier is very important as a compliance group, regulatory compliance folks, right? Because it's not that we will go and collect this data once and our relationship between the supplier is done, right? It's an ongoing forever relationship, right? Like PFAS forever chemicals, right? So, work on supplier development, spend on training, supplier training, or providing them training materials to be aware of the regulation. Keep upfront information. Let them know that you are going to approach them for these data. Give time for them to prepare. A lot of time, it's not that supplier don't want to provide the data or not willing to provide the data, but we are not patient enough to go through that cycle along with our suppliers, right? Or we are not asking by when can we expect those data from them if they don't have it today, right? Having a milestone based approach, what I call as milestone based approach, right? Where you're thinking this as a multi-year program. First year, if I'm a beginner, let me focus on getting 60-70% of the data, right? Successful. I'm not talking about response rate. Response rate is a flawed metrics, but what is actually matters is the success rate. How much data do you really have to determine the compliance, right? So, and how can you take it from 70% to 90% in the second year, or identify those important items which requires testing maybe after the initial year, right? So it's about that relationship and taking this as a multi-year project and being realistic about the response rates. Don't expect that you create the program and you will have 100% of the data. That is not the reality. You need to really chase the suppliers, engage them effectively, meaningfully to get the output, right? And I will always talk about this 80-20 rule, right? Generally your 80% of your revenue will be coming out of your 20% of your customers, right? I mean, that's the rule you all might have heard, right? In our case, it's that, see, 80% of your products are coming from that 10 or 20% of the suppliers only, right? How do you prioritize which one should go first in this effort, right? I mean, if you dump a supplier asking for a data, if you're a big company, I think supplier, we can try to understand the volume here, Shashi. If you could pull out that poll question, I want to understand from audience what is the size of the parts they have in their compliance scope, right? I mean, basically, in your company, how big is your compliance component database, unique parts which needs engagement from the supplier to get the data, compliance data, right? Basically, I'm trying to understand what volume you guys fall under, and then that will also help me to understand or define some complexities for that scale, right? Different scale. See, this is whatever I'm communicating is not universal, but depending upon the industry, we need to look into different factors, where you stand today, and how is your team structured, what data you want, right? What is the timeline? There are so many things in making these decisions, but I mean, prioritizing will help you to solve that bigger issues or low hanging fruits quickly, right? Shashi, that poll is up?
Yeah, almost. Let's give it a couple of seconds. We have most of them voting for 1,000 to 5,000, and here are the results.
Okay, right. See, the more components database nowadays, 10,000 plus parts is a very nominal number. Some of our customers have 300,000, 200,000 line items. I mean, they are big manufacturing setups with a lot of legacy products anyway. But I'm just trying to understand that prioritizing out of that. I mean, generally, the best rule to prioritize is the revenue share they have for your company, right? De-risk the high selling items, right? Understand which are the product which brings 80% of revenue to your company. Focus on those bill of materials and that program first, rather than going all in. If you are lagging in most of your program compared to a competitor, this is a good place to start. And suppliers are global, right? Nowadays, supply chain is global. So there you will see, when you approach suppliers, you will see linguistic barriers, especially China region, Taiwan, and in some other parts. You will see supplier may not be able to respond to our request in our English. They may want support calling and emails in their language. So doing all this and having a multi-shift team to build that relationship, you have to be calling them at their work hour, right? So, I mean, sometimes it's difficult to manage for some companies, but if you have outsourced teams, generally they have these multi-shift teams to cover the global supplier base, right? So those are some of the best practices. Yeah. I think some question came up in the Salim has asked, is priority based on the revenue of end product? Yes, right. I mean, you will prioritize based on the revenue that those product lines bring to your business. Understand which are that 80% of revenue getting products. Generally, it is a smaller subset, then focus on that, and then come to the other 20% revenue getting product is also a good idea to de-risk faster. And rating your suppliers based on the risk, right? Various factors like how quickly they respond to your request, what is the quality of data, what is the completeness of the data they provide, geography, right? All of these factors we consider in quiz compliance tool. We have this auto scoring mechanism based on these factors. Also, you could also build that based on the responsiveness of the suppliers, quality of data, and the geographies and the previous history of response. All of that factors can come in, and you can build that high, medium, low kind of risk factor, which will help you to of course increase that supplier relationship and maximize the and work wherever required, right? Work on those guys, understand whether those suppliers are required. Can we find an alternate? Those discussion you can bring out with your supply chain or other teams only when you have this kind of data to prove them and tell them that this is why we think that we need an alternate supplier for these parts, right? Um, that's it about maximizing the supplier engagement program, right? We have to next move on. Shashi.
Perfect. Now, yeah, perfect, Abhi. I see that you spoke about a lot of supplier engagement, multilingual, multi-shift, and a lot of graphs and a lot of analysis, right? Like, doing that on an Excel sheet would be a problematic statement, but we have something exciting coming up next that's called leveraging automation. I would like to hear this from you, Abhi, since you are our compliance tech visionary, end of the day. Yes.
Cool. Yeah. See, the automation is becoming a necessity in the modern world, right? I mean, maybe earlier it was not so, but day and day the requirements are growing. The demand for sustainability data is growing. So automating becomes important. But the main question is where to automate and why to automate, right? Those are the two big questions we need to answer. See, big chunk of the compliance budget goes in data management, right? Sourcing the data, engaging the suppliers, and all of that, right? Now, imagine you have a 10,000 parts database coming from maybe 500 suppliers. You are preparing forms, Excel forms with some headers listing all the parts that supplier submit and creating a 500 different forms and sending out manual emails one by one to all these supplier, asking them to provide the documentation. The time taken to do this exercise is huge. Automation can really help you to do this really quickly with click of buttons, right? I mean, you can create survey list and then send out the select which regulation you want to request in that data and send out bulk campaigns with a click of a button. That's where you need to use automation. I mean, companies like Acquis, we are also working on a lot of AI-based validations, right? Where we are reducing your effort of cross-checking the data with the documents submitted by suppliers. We gets you alerts, messages, which helps to fast-pace the program as well. So validation is another area which is improving through AI and machine learning. The algorithms are improving and Acquis is also working in that direction. So validation is one more area where you can reduce that effort. Of course, end of the day, you are doing all this to create a roll-up report, respond to your customers, respond to your regulatory authorities, or use this data to report, answer any regulatory notice you might have received for placing a product in the market. So for all of this, automation will help you, right? End of the day, you are keeping that complete transparency in your program. I mean, using automation platform, having those all the communication data with the suppliers in one umbrella, right? Figuring out the gaps in your compliance program, understanding where are those risks and then acting on those risks, right? To really visualize this data in a real time when the program is running and to take action as and how your compliance database is growing will help you to reduce that risk. You should use automation to get that insight to your program through data analytics, right? As I said, traceability becomes more crucial, maintaining that communication record with your suppliers, right? When the regulatory today, maybe you might have got a regulatory notice. Just imagine for a product you placed in the product market 3 years back or 5 years back, right? You need to answer to those regulatory notices. So you need to have what was that communication and documentation you referred to 3 years ago while declaring this product compliance. All these historic records of your supplier engagement, supplier communication, and also the historic documentations becomes very important. Using automation platform software, compliance specific softwares, you can visualize this better, manage this better, and keep your data ready for internal and external auditing, right? And we have been talking, right? And the number of, as you might be seeing in your career, number of data requirement for sustainability, right? Even if we talk about only product material or hazard substance regulations, right? Even in that sector, the demand across the globe, new regulations are popping up all the time. Now PFAS has been a trend. US EPA, you might have heard today that some reporting deadline is extended. So thankfully, otherwise November you should have started reporting if you are doing business in US for TSCA 8A7 record keeping reporting requirement, right? Canada has its own PFAS, and all other countries are coming. China ROHS has some changes recently to scale to the new requirement, right? It's important that you have that base covered, and you will be able to through automation platform add additional regulations and manage them effectively with your existing relationships as well, right? So that's where we can effectively leverage automation. For today's conversation, we will keep it crisp at this level. Shashi.
Perfect. Now you're talking about all of this automation and compliance, right? Now, of course, that will come with a huge cost. Like, moving on next, we'll be speaking about budgeting for compliance success. Your thoughts on this?
Okay, right. Budgeting is complicated in terms of compliance. A lot of you guys might have experienced, if you are a program manager or project manager, how to estimate the effort effectively, right, or close to reality, right? And I mean, today, again, this is a separate topic for a whole webinar itself, right? We use some formulas internally at Aquest based on our experience on to calculate the effort while quoting our customers managed services projects as well, right? But I am just trying to give you a few factors you need to keep in mind while budgeting. I'm not going very detailed about this slide considering the time, but generally you need to understand the unique parts and unique suppliers in your program to estimate the volume, and then you should know which are the regulations are applicable, how many regulations are applicable. So with the volume and the regulations, once you know, then you need to determine what is the time frame you have, right? The budget required for a closing a 10,000 part project in 3 months is different, or the resource requirement may be different compared to running this throughout the year, right? 12 months, budgeting this for 12 months. So you need to understand whether there are some strict deadlines you want to maintain, at least for some regulation, and then other regulations you have budgeted throughout the year to get all the data and determine compliance, right? So those are some of the things are important in while estimating and budgeting. Based on these information complexity, you need to determine the team and the skills required, like whether you need sourcing guys, you need regulatory expert, do you need reporting guys, you need support from any consultant. You need to determine all that and cost for that. You need to consider cost or budget for covering the data gaps, right? The testing of your component, right? You need to anticipate at least 5% of your parts will come for testing. Generally, I say that at least allocate 15 to 20% of your budget towards testing because it's expensive, but sometimes it is required for you to move that last mile and answer your customer question on time, right? So consider budget for that. Consider budget for reporting, responding to their. I mean, a lot of companies need one separate dedicated team to respond to customer request itself. It is more towards an article or a component manufacturer compared to an OEM or a complex manufacturer, but still you need to consider reporting and documentation needs, and budget yourself for the tools required also, right? I mean, based on the volume, even if you have more than 3,000 component today, I mean, I'm just saying a thumb of rule, more than 3,000 parts, 5 regulation, you will require some kind of automation, reporting and a documentation solution. You cannot absolutely manage that through Excels and folders, right? Shashi, can we pull out a poll right now and figure out how our customers before this, I think how our customers are approaching suppliers, right? Is this the next poll question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. First, two last poll question, right? Quickly. One question is on how are you approaching? What is your method of supplier outreach? Is it manual, individual emails? Do you have internal PLM, ERP sending out bulk campaigns, or is it a Excel macros and your inbox to send out these emails to supplier? How are you sending out these requests to your supplier? Is one thing I want to know from you. Please participate. The more I know about you, the more specific information I can give. Right? We should also understand that this is helping you out to continue doing webinars like this on an ongoing basis, right? So participate, polls, Shashi, once done, please let me know.
Yeah, we are 50% through. We'll give it a couple of seconds. Let's see if we have something
Right.
coming up.
Before that, let me close, right? On the costing side, you should also consider a monitoring cost, right? You somebody has to monitor these regulations constantly within your team, you yourself, and keep track of that budget. Up and over to all of this, I mean, considering all of these factors, determining the resource required to complete this, and then estimating how much time it might require for each component or each supplier to complete the program, you can estimate the number of hours or the resource required to complete this product within the defined time frame, right? That's how you will come to a conclusion. We will have a detailed webinar in this series. We will talk about budgeting. It may be interested for some segment of the data, less for
Definitely, Ravi. I think we are running short of time. Sorry to cut you off, right? Let me publish the result, and we should be able to move to the next slide. Now you did talk about data gaps, right? Which are common in compliance, right? We would want to know how would you solve this last mile data problem in compliance?
Yeah. Let's move on to the next slide, correct? So, everybody is focused. This is the most important problem today, right? You have data, you have a solid program, still we are not able to estimate the compliance status at a product level because we don't have the data for few of those parts, right? Few of them are non-compliant. We need to really take action to make them compliant. So there will be like that, what I call it as a tail end of the project where 10, 20, 15, depending upon how effective your program is. You need to close these data gaps, right? So what are the best strategies or methods you can use? Quickly going over it. You need support from your internal team, especially from buyers and component engineers. Buyers to penetrate inside the company. When you don't get response, they might be purchasing from that supplier, so they might help you to penetrate or get the data on time. Relationship with them, relationship with component engineers to understand the life cycle, understand if there are any form fit functional alternates. Those kind of supports are required from different teams internally. So it is a collaborative effort. I even say that this should be part of all of their KPIs. If you are a management level compliance person, you should think about this, right? And keeping that clear expectation from your supplier upfront when you are registering them as a new vendor. Have corporate policies, procurement policies where you spell out that okay, you need data for these regulation, right? Because that is becoming necessary of the modern world, and you can seek out that from your supply chain to include this in your program, right? And then there are some hidden places, like I already mentioned, hidden places of data, right? Hidden places in the sense it can be in your engineering drawings, it can be material standards of a stainless steel, which you can use along with the total weight to determine the substance level breakdown of a material standard if it is mentioned in the drawings for a stainless steel rod or part or something like that. I told about SDS and other hidden information data, especially for custom parts. Looking at SDS documents for chemical items will help you to close some gaps. But most importantly, seeking that answer, right? Even if your supplier is not providing you the data, knowing that he don't have the data or he is willing to provide the data after 5 months, right? Those kind of response, I mean, seek a response from your suppliers. It may be with the data or without data, but always seek that response from your suppliers. budgeting for testing is really important to close this gap. I have been talking about it, will not go detail again. And also you can do that material risk analysis, right? I mean, material analyst can figure out maybe this is fastener, highly unlikely that it will have an ROHS compliance substances. Maybe based on these knowledges, we can have a material based risk analysis to avoid some of the budgeting if we are sure about not having presence of hazard substances in that particular category of products, right? So all this information, all these steps will take you closer to closing that last mile in your products and keep your products compliant throughout the product life cycle.
Perfect, right? Like now coming up next, like, when you say product life cycle, how do you ensure product remains compliant throughout its life cycle?
Okay, let's move to the next slide, correct? Yeah, so quickly, I will not, again, with the time we want to keep 5-10 minutes for Q&A. Streamlining ongoing compliance. To streamline, you need to build strong relationship. I cannot emphasize this enough. Your program dependent on your suppliers. The relationship is the key here. Monitor regulatory regulations for changes. I've been talking about this, very important to know when the change happens and see how it is applicable, and then taking actions when the exemptions get expired or new substance gets added. It's important to know those changes. Optimizing your data refresh intervals. Maybe sometimes ROHS data you can, if there are no recent development, you can maybe collect once in 2 years. Maybe FMD data based on the volume you can refresh once in 3 years or 5 years, right? Not every year you need to go and ask for all compliance data. Understand what changes have happened. If it is not significant, maybe you can reduce the number of things you are asking your suppliers. Imagine it is adding a overload for them. They need to act, or even if they have done proactive compliance program, they need to still figure out and give you that documentation. So optimize your process. Don't just blindly include all the regulations and email it to all your suppliers and imagine that you have done your compliance program. It requires that active project management methodologies to get best results out of the program, right? And the goal is to reduce your compliance program cost over time, right? Now you have that relationship and know whom to reach out to in most of your suppliers, and you know to optimize the data refresh interval effectively. Now you can over the time reduce that communication cost which you have, validation cost which you have based on the supplier risk and all of that. You can reduce the cost of managing the same set of data. New regulation may come in, you have a lot of new products coming in that may require some effort from the scratch, but overall your goal is to, can I reduce my cost at least 10-20% year on year, right, to manage or maintain the ongoing compliance. Okay, so that's a few things on the ongoing compliance thing.
Perfect. Right. Now, like, since you're talking about, like, life cycle of this particular product, like, we have a correlation with our next slide. Like, how do we future-proof your compliance program?
Okay, I think this is the last slide for today. See, sustainable data demand is growing, right? I mean, you see new regulation, few things which you wouldn't have heard about is in your inbox asking for that data, right? So adopting to this changing sustainability data need is important. Setting up your team for the success of the future requirement is important, right? You can utilize full material disclosure as much as possible. Again, 100% of your supplier won't provide you FMD data. I'm sure some of your suppliers will keep 10% of the information as proprietary confidential. But the more data you have, whatever level it is possible, right, source from your suppliers. This will help you to reduce the cost once you start utilizing a compliance automation softwares like Aquis Compliance. We provide red flags for high risk smelters, red flags for high risk smelters. So if you have full material disclosure, it will help you to reduce the ongoing maintenance cost as well. You need automation for scale. New regulations are coming up. Manually doing this is becoming impossible. So automation is very important to scale your program. And finally, maintaining continuity in your program is important. A lot of time I see that you go and approach this year, get the data, and you are done. Then again, you are waking up after a year or 1.5, and again thinking that, okay, now time has come, we need to refresh the documentation. Keeping it as an ongoing activity, building that ongoing relationship and having that continuity. To have the continuity, you should also have what are the previous communication with that suppliers, right? Capturing those communication logs, email logs, right? And keeping those historic documentation supplied by that company, that supplier company, right? And making sure that this information is passed through when the personals change within your company, right? New compliance, the old person has left and the new person is coming and running. He should continue from where the other resource has left it, right? Not start from scratch. For that, keeping record of all this becomes important. So that's where the companies like us comes, right? So this is a very high level overview on what are the things, some practical tips. We have tried to keep it very candid, so that you are and provide you some useful information from our experience. We hope this was useful for you. If you have liked the webinar and want to want more of this from our side, please share your thoughts in LinkedIn or social media. Share your experience if it was useful, and if there are some things we can improve, please provide feedback here. And we will get more of this and go deep dive into some of these topics we touched today. This was a session where we give an overview about the aspects you need to be thinking in terms of material compliance. Going further, we will go deep dive into budgeting, data, and so on and so forth. So thank you everyone for the opportunity and time. Shashi will have some more information to share with you. He has been telling some exciting news. I am also waiting to see what is that surprise. But yeah, your encouragement, more and more people attending will give us this scale. So please let your colleagues know if you felt this is useful to join our upcoming sessions. Thank you, and over to you, Shashi. I can take any questions.
Right, perfect. Right. Before we do that, I have one final poll question, Abhi, if that's not too late, right? Like it's very simple. Right. We can just take a couple of minutes to answer them and we can conclude.
Shashi, do you want to let the audience meantime know about the upcoming webinar we have?
Yes, of course, Abhi, right. Like, on 15th of September, we're planning another webinar for PFAS. This is particularly regarding TASCA Section 8A7. We'll be covering the reporting requirements, complete deep dive into it. And people who stay throughout the webinar will definitely have something surprise planned for them as well. That is something I have in pipeline. Right, perfect. Now that I think we have the answers, like the most of them say that Excels and folders for is something that they use to manage their compliance data, right?
Or it might be complex. If that conversation comes in, please recommend to your team to review a quiz compliance platform. Also, we have a very modern sustainability platform, AI enabled, built with latest technology and modern mindset, right? Which is unique from whatever the platform you would have seen. So please recommend. That's a request. And Shashi, over to you. If there is no question, maybe you can conclude.
And I think we have one question here. Oh yeah, somebody's saying very informative. Thank you so much, Salim. Like, we will have some more webinars planned accordingly in terms of managing your compliance and according to our tool as well. We have something planned in pipeline. We will have them published very soon. And thank you so much for your time, Abhi. It's been an incredible session and more to come. And if I would like to see you guys more in our upcoming webinars.
Sure. Yeah. We have PFAS regular webinar coming up, guys, on the 8A7. You will get emails. Please register and let your friends to join our upcoming webinars to make our time also useful, right? Thank you so much. And we look forward to see you again in our next session. Take care. Bye-bye.
Good day, guys. Take care. Bye.